Oh, thank you. Okay. So thank you all for joining. We're going to start our last meeting for this series. So I'm just going to start immediately. And first of all, let me say thank you to ICOM Israel and to American Embassy in Tel Aviv for initiating and making this all dream come true, the series of Museum Restart. We're very proud to take part in that. And the Design Forum has chosen Ellen Lupton from the Cooper Hewitt to be our partner. And we thank you, Ellen. This is the third session, so I'm going to say thank you again for joining us and being such a great partner and in this collaboration. Reimagining the future of museums was a challenge, and we have decided to speak about three questions or three themes throughout this series. One was about collecting design, one is about presenting design, and today we're going to talk about working with designers, which we kept for the end, which is, I think, the exciting question and something that deals with our everyday life and our passion. So besides Alan, who's a senior curator at the Cooper Hewitt, so whoever of the people who are here who doesn't know her, please do yourself a favor and follow her Instagram and blog and their wonderful exhibitions at the Smithsonian Design Museum in New York. She's also a writer and a curator, an educator and a designer. Which is the ultimate connection or combination that we could think of. We thought it would be interesting to invite someone else to talk with us today. And we have invited Tal Erez, who's a designer and researcher and curator and chief curator of the International Jerusalem Design Week. That it was a pleasure to be your guest for years, and I hope it's going to be for next years, having our salon in the Design Week. So working with designers, we're trying today a new formula of presentation and discussion. We're going to chat about our questions, our hopes, dreams, and challenges. So working with designers. I think we all agree it's a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful experience to meet creative people, to take part in their process, in their dream process, in the little questions that they come up with, and of course, be part of their exhibitions, celebrations, and triumphs. I think working with designers asks us to do or to use all our skills as curators, but also as human beings, and work with compassion and care. When we usually talk about curatorial work, in Hebrew, it's called otzeret. And in Wikipedia, it means that it says, at least, the definition that she was a part, or the one who was in charge of the king's treasure, or something like that, which is, of course, nothing to do with real curatorial work. I mean, maybe we all hope to be king's treasure keepers, but we're not. So curator, I usually try and work with the Latin word that means to take care. And I think when we realize that this is our role in life, and taking care means so much. So it's to take care for, to attend to see to, and to worry about. But when we usually think of curators, and I was looking for this very early image of a curator working in a gallery in Lille. When I ask my students, who's the curator in the image, they usually say the one who does nothing. So it is another way of looking at curatorial work. Alan.
I love that idea of curating as care. This is the first exhibition I ever did at Cooper Hewitt back almost 30 years ago. It was called Mechanical Brides, and it was about women as consumers of design and technology. And you can see here this setup, which was designed by myself and Lauren and Constantine Boehm. Cooper Hewitt is in a mansion. It is not in a sparkling modern building, but in a turn of the 20th century mansion. And so we installed this like little corner of a suburban basement in this fancy dining room in this historic house, and put these washing machines there on this concrete platform made out of poured concrete. And care, the idea of care, you know, it's a very feminized kind of labor. So many women take this role in families, in the workplace. And this exhibition was really exploring the idea of care and the technologies and social systems around that. So I love your definition. It really speaks to me. Thanks, Galit.
Thank you, Ellen. I think when I'm trying to translate it into Hebrew, we don't have a beautiful care word. It usually translates into worry, which is in Hebrew doeget. And then you get this wrinkles in your forehead saying, I'm worried about something. But care has so much more to do with the way that you care for people, you care for objects, you see too, there's a wonderful experience they have together, and you care about this whole experience of being in a museum or in a design exhibition. So I want to ask Tal about his experience in the design week, because then you don't just take care of your 200 designers that you work with every year, but you also need to take care of the thousands of people who are coming to visit Design Week.
Yeah, I think, you know, there are different versions of curation. My background is as a designer. And for me, doing an exhibition is more or less like doing any design work. It's just that your raw materials are people, or projects, which relates to what you said about kind of the human skills or lack thereof sometimes that need to be involved. But in that sense, and I think some of the slides later will also talk about it, I think this idea of caring, which maybe the word you're looking for is
okay, Ken. It's a good one. I'm going to use it. Thank you.
I think it's kind of the idea that you are creating something. You're creating a project. It's just you're a bit of an invisible in this project. But when you care, it probably shows that there's intent.
Yeah.
And when there's intent, then I think you can argue about it, but it's definitely you know, your heart's laid out there. So I think there's enough to talk about.
Thank you. So I thought of starting with the alphabet. We're not going to go through the whole alphabet, don't worry. But I thought of when we talk about our work, I was trying to think about the words I would use to describe our works. And the first one for me is always starts with Aleph, with A, and the word ahava, love. And when we think about love and you connect it to care, you understand very early in your profession that you need to love everyone. The difficult, the complicated, the fearful, the safe, the disturbed, the one who are always disturbing your work, but you need to love them all. And I think what you need to love most is the fear of making a mistake. The fear of being alone are the two greatest fears that you have as a curator, and you need to love them both. Because being alone as a curator, you understand that you're never really alone because you work with your community. And the fear of making a mistake deals with this love and care. Because if you allow your designers and the designers you work with and yourselves to make mistakes, I think this is a true sense of love or museum love as I see it. So Tal, if you have anything to add for love beside our love.
I think I put a slide there so we can maybe show it. I just chose this slide because, you know, Jerusalem Design Week is a bit of a weird creature. It's on one hand, it's a week of design, but it's a public event, so it's not commercial at all, and it's very heavily curated. So if that's most I'm mostly going to talk about Jerusalem Design Week, not only, but mostly. And then, and it has a very short time. So it's like a biennial that happens every year, which is quite tough. So as I said before, it's kind of like a design project, which you need to fill with design projects. So we always have this kind of structure, and we imagine something, and then we invite people to take over the different parts of it. So we think this could be that, but then we call someone and we give him a brief, and then that guy needs to kind of see my vision, but also usually completely do something different. And in that sense, I thought about love as a form of trust in a way. So I showed this project that was in last year's edition of Jerusalem Design Week, final edition, and it was, we called it the circus. I'm not going to go into all the details, but we have a very nice space at the Hansen House where we operate, which is an attic, and we thought about this piece that talks about coming home from the circus, you know, or coming back to reality. And we had different visions about what the space could be, but eventually we had to, and not everything works through an open call. It can't always be the solution. So we had to invite people, which we saw different things that they did, but of course not the work that they haven't done yet. And 80% of the works that we do in design weeks are new work. So we never know what we're going to get until all the lights, and you know, it's 1 week of setting up. So you turn on all the lights and you hope for the best. But this idea of, you know, just, you said making mistakes, giving your trust to someone, you know, just giving the brief, telling your vision, and then letting them roll with it. And the conversations end at some point, and then they just do what they want to do. I mean, you can't follow this forever. And I think it's a very nice example of a couple of very young designers that really pulled through, and it makes you love them also for not effing things up for you, but also because they can give you something that you thought you imagined, but you've never seen it in this certain way. So I think that was these are kind of the relationships that are kind of professional, but also emotional, that we like to have. And there's another image there just to show what it was. It was like this circular plane that was sectioned into these kind of slices with mirrors on both sides. And then you were kind of in a flight with yourself. And it was very, very beautiful.
Ellen, any thoughts about love?
Well, you have to love what you do, you know? And I think your point about failure and making mistakes, this is very difficult in a museum, because we work with a lot of colleagues who, you know, want everything delivered, a perfect manuscript and a perfect checklist. And really the design process is iterative, where you're constantly improving as you go. You don't start with something finished. So I love what Tal's saying about opening up the space, and you don't know what you're going to get. You know, the curator doesn't know at the beginning what it will be. And yet museums kind of want us to know, right?
Yes, always. I think also in the future, it's not going to change. If you talk about the future of museums, I think we would like to stretch out this little unsafe place that we work in, not knowing what's going to happen at the end. And all the rest of the museum system would really like to know what we're going to do. What would be the image for the poster, the final name of the exhibition, and so on. And I think holding on to this very small, unknown treasure box that we work with is something I would really hope to see in the future of museums. And I think even though we work digitally together, you know, this last year and a half taught us different things. I think working with the unknown is something that we would like to share and cherish for future.
Well, Galit, tell me what you think about home, because home is the opposite of the unknown.
So thank you. But home for me is this feeling that you're home, that you are the anchor for the designers surrounding you. So yes, I'm home. It's something you always say as a curator. I'm here to take apart all those complicated ideas, all your fears, all your thoughts. I'm here to discuss what you think. I'm here for you. I'm here to be this anchor that you need. When you leave home, you have a wonderful experience outside and you come home to process it. I sometimes feel that this is my role in this relationship with designers, to be some kind of a home for them. For me personally, the museum is my home. Any museum, I feel at home in a museum. I open the door of the museum and I can relax. I can breathe again. I can go around slowly. Sometimes I even, shut the phone so nobody talks to me. So I can really, immerse into this experience of the museum, and I feel at home in the museum. So this is.
Well, that's really interesting, Galit, because my museum is a home. It is a mansion. And if you go to the next slide, I can show you. So much of what designers create is objects for the home. And this is some work that I fell in love with by Lanza Vecchia and why, for helping older people be independent at home and enjoy their life at home with these beautiful products that allow them to move their possessions around and stay balanced and so forth. And they truly harmonize with the home. And I use this term homebody, and we use that to refer to someone who likes to stay at home, right? Like during the pandemic, many of us have bundled ourselves up at home and just love it here. And so designers can help us stay at home and thrive at home. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And I think Tal has, Tal's Design Week is in a different home.
Yes, also a home. Design Week happens at the Hansen House, which for about 100 years was the lepers hospital.
Hospital, and sometimes I think hospice also.
Yeah, for about 50 years it was a hospice, so it was really an autarkic place. They grew their own food, and they really lived there, and everybody in Jerusalem was fearful of this place. And it's a very so on one hand it has its undeniable charm. On the other hand, it's a horrific nightmare thinking of it as an exhibition space many times. If you go to the next slide, maybe it will clarify this kind of scenography of exhibiting in or thinking about what's the experience of the visitor going through the Hansen House, because it has like 8 entrances and exits and everything. There's no linear line. And many times we think, we work with designers through different tools. So we have open calls, we have working with the academies, we have specific commissions, different scales, we have programming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really not, it's kind of a meta exhibition. It's not fully in our hands. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, what you need to think is first, what you communicate to designers that you want to have eventually. It's like a puzzle also. So you also try to think if it needs to work somehow like a pattern. So it doesn't matter if you switch some pieces around, that it's still, you have a coherent notion of what you want people to come out with. And for this edition of Jerusalem Design Week in 2019, it was called East, which tried to talk about this kind of very strong dichotomy of West and East that we see in the world, but also actually the relativeness of the word East and East of what, etc. So where is the East in a globe? We thought of this of this building as kind of a digestive system. So you know where you enter and you know where you leave, and you know how you enter and you know how you leave. But whatever happens in the middle is kind of a mix. It doesn't really matter the way you're going to read it, as long as eventually you go out and you say, when you went in, you said, I know the difference between West and East. And when you went out, you asked yourself, what is East? And this is done through work with a lot of designers, some kind of highlighting points. And if we talk about working with designers, it's also knowing which designers you need for specific points to be highlighted, which things could be kind of altered and be more generic, let's say. But also working with the designers that can give you this circulation system, and that's maybe the next slide, which is also interesting. How do you communicate yourself to the person? So this was the diagram and the building. This is the Hansen House. It was brought to HQ Architects that did this installation. And again, to see their translation of this diagram into kind of a new circulation system in the building was super fascinating. And again, quite joy in thinking about how can you, let's say, remodel your home every time again.
Yep.
And make you experience it differently.
I think it was a wonderful experience to re-enter the house from the top and not going into the usual entrance that we usually go into the Hansen house, which is the front door, and going up the staircase, looking to the east, and then slowly going down and circling downstairs instead of going up. I think it was a whole new experience of this house.
I think what their very brief concept was, this building is a very clear north-south building. So the main entrance is north. There's a backside which is south, and they just said we're going to turn it around 90 degrees. So it's going to be a west-east building. So that's what happens with this staircase. It goes to the east and then gives you a view of Jerusalem east.
Beautiful. Okay, so size. I know I'm going to say the obvious thing now, but size doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you work on a tiny little exhibition in one room and you have 2 objects to work with, or you work in a huge museum with 1,000 square meters and 300 objects. As a curator, you face the same challenges. You need to go through the whole process. And I think size, as we think about it, doesn't really matter. So may we just agree on that and say, it's a difficult work. It's a wonderful but difficult work, even if we have to show 2 objects in a gallery. So Ellen, if you want to.
Yeah, but size is something that we struggle with as curators and as design curators. You know, many of the objects that I display in my exhibitions are very small. And so sometimes it's a challenge to get people to see them, right? And we use lighting and showcase design and color to try to make these tiny things more visible. If you go to my slide, I'll show you an example. This is from my exhibition on Herbert Bayer, Bauhaus Master from 2019. And this piece that you see, the menstrual cycle on the left, is a brochure that he designed in 1939 for a pharmaceutical company for hormone replacement drugs for the ladies. And the brochure is tiny. It is this itty bitty little thing. And yet Herbert Bayer made this beautiful painting of this cosmic uterus surrounded by the phases of the month and the phases of the moon. And it's this kind of the birthplace of humanity. And yet the thing is, 13 centimeters wide. It's this tiny piece. So we with the graphic designer, we blew it up, and you can see in the corner above that wooden doorway, we made it into a poster, and we took many of Herbert Bayer's smaller painted illustrations and photo montages and made them big, like you were out on the street and this was a giant poster wall. So that's something that we can do as curators and working with exhibition designers to transform people's sense of size.
I think an interesting, I just had an interesting thought about this exhibition. Sometimes you, like the tiniest objects, sometimes if you transfer them from being an object into being a space, I think this question of size becomes more than just a question of size. It's more about this being able to enter those ideas or feel that you're actually meeting those thoughts and the ideas of the designers. And and becoming one with the space. And it relates very nice to this, I think this notion that we talked about for so many times about having a safe space to ask questions, to try and let go of your old thoughts and embrace new words and new thoughts and new concepts. And I think safe space doesn't really matter if it's a small one or a huge one. I think what happens here is when the objects become a space, it actually surrounds you and it becomes a safe space. Thank you for this. So similar. An exhibition is unlike anything else. I would walk in this space, empty space usually first, try to figure out where the light goes, where people would love to walk through. And I do needed to always to combine in my head the space, the object, the story, and the path. So it is not similar to anything else. It is a combination, as if I need to put it together, of different things that we know. But when you ask a curator, you have a new concept and you say, well, would it make a good exhibition? And sometimes they say, well, it would be a good book or it would be a good movie. Then you understand that it's not going to be a good exhibition because an exhibition is unlike anything else. It's something of its own. And I think Tal also agrees with that. Having a design week, which is unlike anything else, curatorial wise.
Yeah, I think it's also kind of one of your roles, and especially working with the exhibition designer. I mean, there has to be kind of order introduced and not chaos. And the order comes from deciding what is similar and what is different. Mm-hmm. And then laying things together in a sense that you can read through them in a sort of coherent way. I think I put a slide here from our last edition, which also refers to size a bit, because I kind of said, where should I put it? Because, you know, Jerusalem Design Week works in very different scales. As you saw, there's like a building scale, and there's an installation scale, and it's sometimes hard to allow the smaller things, the smaller objects, to get the attention they need in such a hectic environment, which also you see it empty, but it's never empty because there's so many people all the time. What we try to do, and we don't always succeed, is trying to give the same attention and the same space, let's say, metaphorical space to every scale of work. And with this edition, with the circus, we looked at the way the freak shows in the circus worked. Many times it was kind of a row of vitrines, like cabinets where different freaks were on show. So all the cabinets were the same, but inside there was a whole story of a person. And really, I think in this edition, we really try to work like a matryoshka, like a babushka of installation. So this was like every work got its own environment. So you look through the glass, but inside it could have depth or not, big or small, color or light or projection, but you can really take away the space that the objects are in, like the physical object, the gallery, and look into the details of the object within a specific space you create for them. I think it was also an interesting conversation with the designers themselves that suddenly designed kind of a micro installation, like even if it's just a tiny object, it suddenly had a context that is not, here's everything laid down on tables in a big space.
It's interesting your thought about those micro installations, because I imagine that we usually talk about visitors, but in your case, the objects should always be in a safe space, should be in like a very coherent space. So all those thousands of people rushing through them, which actually have this moment to meet them, but they're going to be secured throughout this design week.
Yeah, secured both technically,
Yes.
but also I think in the way that you want to give each work, especially when you work with the designers. So it's not somebody who died or something. It's somebody who's going to come there and probably present new work or a work that hasn't been shown before. And you want to give each work its best possible presentation. Like, not that it kind of fades away because there's too much or something like that. And then in that sense, similarity, which is kind of the topic of this chapter,
Yeah.
I think is a benefit. It makes people understand what they see also, and lets them really sink into the differences because of the similarity in this case of the exhibition design.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to go through present, and I think working with designers, working with design, you really have to be very aware of present, but you always have to remember that this present was different 2 weeks ago, and it's going to be different 2 weeks from now. And I think this it took me a long time to let go of this pressure of knowing what's going to be right in next year or in 2 years, and really look at the present as some kind of a reflection of our thoughts, our mind, of our society, and understand that we need to talk now about what's happening at this moment without having this weight of those historians looking over our shoulder saying, but present, you cannot say anything about it. So present, this is what we do in design. I think if you look throughout the design history, present is the interesting moment. We have invited the last session some archaeology curator that actually showed us that the present could be 2,500 years old. So sometimes the present is a very flexible term that we're going to use. So I think, yes, Ellen.
Yeah, so being a curator and looking at what's going on in the world right now, it's one of the things that we do. It's something that Tal does, of course, in his work. And at Cooper Hewitt, I'm working on a show that opens in December about the pandemic. And this is like the present period tense. This is a tense topic. This is not something that a lot of people want to keep thinking about. And it's also been a story that's been changing while we were curating the exhibition. So we started organizing the exhibition with Mass Design Group, who is a co-curator and also the exhibition designer. We started working on this in March 2020. And so now the show is getting ready to open, and how to convey to the public that this story is unfinished, that the pandemic isn't over, right? So in March 2020, we all thought we would be telling a story that's the past. But in fact, this has dragged on longer than we thought, and we're telling a story that's still open. And so trying to create an exhibition environment that conveys that sense of unease and danger and loss, but also a safe place to be and a place to celebrate the amazing things that architects and doctors and nurses and product designers have created in this time in response to the pandemic. And Tal, you're doing open calls and inviting people to submit. Tell us about how you deal with the present.
Well, it's, as you say, very...
I think the next slide.
Yeah. I mean, it's very tricky. You see that the open call for Jerusalem Design Week 2020, which was released in 2019 and presented in 2021, was kind of, we had this kind of, when we wrote the open call, it was a thought, we had a thought about this kind of feeling of the end of the world coming. That was before the pandemic. And the circus dealt with escapism or lack thereof. So our inability to escape, or that all our escapism mechanisms are tainted suddenly. So every flight you take makes you consider the carbon emissions, and every steak you eat makes you think of vegans, and so on and so on. And we were lucky with the pandemic in a way, that it made it relevant. But always the search for a topic that is both relevant and yet can stand the sense of time that it takes. Could be 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. It's always tricky, and I think also the kind of the divisive line sometimes between museums, galleries, and kind of more haphazard events. For us, the open call is a tool for that exactly. So if you are vague enough and clear enough in it, then you can hope that whatever you get back will kind of frame the present a little more decisively than you do. Doesn't always work. I think designers really, really like very clear briefs. We are not doing that, but we're trying to be better. But that struggle with like asking questions of the contemporary and then mostly getting the answers, I think in the form of things, I think is the moment where we, like it or not, we realize the present of the topic we chose, but also of design in Israel or abroad or whatever. I mean, it's part of kind of the insight into design, not only to whatever you want to talk about, you know.
Which is always very curious to come over to Design Week and see what those responses were to your open call. And of course, it's a very beautiful moment to see a lot of work of a lot of designers and to realize what's on their mind and where are they going. So I'm gonna skip time because we already spoke about time, but I'm going to invite Ellen to talk about time.
Okay. So one of the greatest things as a design curator is when another design curator uses something that you made available. So this is a show by Michelle Miller-Fisher, who presented at our first event in this series. And it's her show on designing motherhood. And she saw the little brochure about the uterus from our Herbert Bayer exhibition. It had never been published before. So we brought that work to visibility. And then she put it in her show, and you'll see here that she blew it up as this giant poster. And because we had, photographed it in high resolution, we gave this object a new life. So this thing that was in the drawers of the archive, this tiny forgotten thing, has now entered the universe. And that's just so exciting to see. Yeah, and I think Tal has some things to say about time too.
I will just be very brief. Design Week is a week, which is a very different time cycle than, let's say, an exhibition in a museum. And it invites or requests a more, let's say, a bigger spectrum that is somewhere between performance and static exhibition. And one of the ways we challenge designers that we work with is to think about kind of this performance of the week, the way the week is unraveled through the work. It's different projects, not all of them. And we have had some nice successes with it. And this year we even tried to go further. And one of, if we skip 2 slides ahead, Galit, if you can go, not this one, the next one. This year, we really invited a circus group that is built of a circus man and a designer to really activate, because we had the circus, so it had to have a circus group, really activate the whole week. And they worked throughout the week. And the idea that you can give life to an exhibition throughout its entirety is a very unique, again, in a very curated way, it's a very kind of unique platform to do it. Because usually you don't get this chance. You can do it in the opening or in certain programming, but for us it was quite an experience, interesting, difficult, and I think beautiful eventually.
Beautiful. It was an amazing experience to share this thing. It was, I think it looks, it lost the context from the hands-on house. It was like, it could be anywhere, it could be any time, and it was totally a different experience. It was beautiful. Okay, we move forward. Good. So what is a good exhibition? Most complicated question, I think, that we're being asked. I think we're all found ourselves trying to answer this question as well. Sometimes it's, is it about the tickets we're selling? Is it about the massive crowd that are coming in? Is it an important exhibition for designers, or is it an important exhibition for the design world? Is it going to be an exhibition that really makes a difference? That, you know, after this exhibition, something happened. And I have to compliment Tal here, that curator, we done handle and myself, the exhibition about shade, which didn't even had to appear in this exhibition form, but the changes it made, or I think the response that we got for this exhibition, the changes mayors and engineers made after this exhibition in Israel is enormous. So maybe a good exhibition is not just good for itself. Maybe a good exhibition is something that really needs to have those ripple effect of a good exhibition into our world. Ellen? Something about good exhibition?
I didn't know, just go on. We have a lot to cover still.
I just say that Yud is for Jerusalem, and this is usually our homage to the first design curator in Israel. I think one of his favorite images of being an artist, a curator, a thinker, not always doing what everyone expected him to do, really breaking all boundaries he had. So Yud for Jerusalem, this is it. Tal. Jerusalem.
I just put an image. I didn't know what we were going to talk about really, so I thought about this idea of working with designers, and we had an exhibition about 100 years for the Society for Jerusalem, which we invited young architects to curate, and it was an interesting conversation about how things that are research born need to be presented in certain contexts. And so this kind of idea of layering experience and form on content is sometimes a struggle. It was a very nice exhibition eventually, but for a long time it was a research book. So you said it before, so you just said Jerusalem, so I remember that, but you can skip forward.
But I thought I should mention that it was one of the most wonderful exhibition that was a historical exhibition, an ethno design exhibition, some of archaeology. I think it was a beautiful combination that could happen only in Jerusalem. So it was a very particular way of showing the spirit of the city, this historical side, but through the designer's eyes. It was a beautiful exhibition. Thank you. So it's just an exhibition. It's not a brain surgery, someone once told me. What do you have to do? I mean, like, take some images, put them on the wall, arrange the objects, and there you have it. It's an exhibition. So I think it doesn't matter if you have a short deadline or a long deadline. Just an exhibition is something we cannot always say. And even though sometimes we don't feel that we're appreciated as design curators because, you know, eventually you just grabbed some interesting objects or invited some interesting designers to work with. I think putting them all together, creating this wonderful space is just an exhibition for me. I think Ellen is smiling like it's like,
I love it. It looks like there's a beautiful slide of some obscure object coming up. Can you share that with us?
Yes, it's an exhibition that Tom Cohen here and myself curated for the Palestine Plishtim Museum in Ashdod. It's an ethno-historical museum, and we have curated an exhibition called Objects of Transition. And one of the most beautiful things about this exhibition was it was placed as a cabinet of curiosity kind of exhibition. So your eyes could follow a sentence of color, a sentence of material, a sentence of content. So it allowed you to read the exhibition in different ways. And every time I photograph it, it looks a bit different and I see new connections in between them. But all of them are talking about these objects that are part of our life and objects of design, of course, and are part of our communal memory and allow designers to reimagine their future by looking backwards. Okay, Tal.
I'll try to be brief. I think, you know, an exhibition is an excuse mostly to do stuff. So either to do research or to do programming or to highlight certain things. And you gave the example of the Shade exhibition, which was not a good exhibition, I think. It was even almost bad, but it was eventually, as you said, a good exhibition because it generated enough interest to talk about the things that it needed to talk about. And without this moment in time where you can collect the people and get the press and do the thing, it couldn't have moved forward. Within Jerusalem Design Week, it's also an excuse. It's an event and it gets the people around and it gets the press, but it's an excuse, for example, to ask Israeli designers mostly, but of course internationals as well, questions that are not commercial. It's an excuse to pay them good money or better money to create new work well, and then it's an excuse to get people from abroad and from here to see it or participate or collaborate. And a really important part of Jerusalem Design Week is to be a motor for a kind of a voice for certain, let's say, certain niches in Israeli design that had no platform. Yeah. So I just put this super beautiful piece of a guy that we saw in a graduate exhibition in Bezalel, and we talked about him, and he just started something with a couple of his friends, but they looked like they know what they want to say, and they did this incredible piece that was so good. They just locked themselves in the room, came out, and then we saw it, and it was incredible. I can't explain it, but I will skip it. And then it was so good. It was then presented at the ICOM Museum, and then they became a studio that gets more work, and we see it. And my partner to this Jerusalem Design Week, Anat Safwan, who sits in a lot of those, stipendia kind of, a lot of funds that give away money to young designers. Most of the time, the first work they show is the work they've done for Jerusalem Design Week, because it's the work that they could really express themselves. And sometimes you just need that little nudge after you graduate to get the possibility to be an independent thinking designer. So the exhibition is just an exhibition, but it's also a great excuse to generate a lot of actions around it, which we feel is very important.
I just want to add to that, you just need to find a good curator to work with you and open the door for you and find the budget to allow you to fulfill your thoughts. Rest, no such thing as a curator, so we move on.
No, I put an image there, Galit.
I know, there is.
It's my vacation in Austria, because I completely deny this romantic notion that we constantly work. It's a complete bullshit in my eyes. I had a very nice time and I didn't think for 1 second about design.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this is Tal resting.
Yes.
We're going to change the slides. Okay. I'm going to say suppose. And I just want to say that this is one of my favorite words in the world. I think suppose, or let's imagine, let's think of. And Tal added this image. Suppose.
Yeah, I just think that, we always say that nobody knows what you planned and wasn't there eventually. For us, it's super frustrating, but when you open, nobody knows what didn't happen. I showed this thing, we showed it at the Design Art Tokyo in 2019 in the Spiral Gallery in Tokyo. And this kind of golden chandelier is actually made out of wheat. Just strands of kind of dried wheat.
It's a beautiful installation, really.
Yeah, it's super nice. And the exhibition in Tokyo was built from projects that were initially made for Jerusalem Design Week. And this piece was something that we said, okay, we need a piece for the patio and we don't know what it's going to be. And we talked to these guys and it was just endless conversations and we didn't know anything. We didn't know what's going to be at any certain point. But we also have bosses. So we also always had to tell them, no, it's going to be great. It's going to be this chandelier, blah, blah, blah. And we constantly had to kind of sell it and we didn't know. And we were really scared out of our minds. Like we didn't know if it's going to happen. And it did. And it was so well that it then traveled to Tokyo and it won the first prize in Tokyo. And it was super great. So I don't know what, I think the suppose thing was about kind of also kind of supposing that you know what you're doing.
Okay. I hope you already know that there's no end to this. Not really. And I shared here a thought that on the morning of opening an exhibition, at this very exciting moment of the press conference, as a curator, this exhibition that you're just opening is not interesting anymore. Your mind is with the next exhibition, with the next challenge that you have. And I think what happens to me usually is when I go at the last morning, just before the journalists arrive, I usually want to move something. I want to turn something. I want to align something. And that was the moment that they locked the galleries and they pushed me out. And they said, do not go through the gallery now, because they knew it's gonna move a minute before the opening. So it's a never-ending story. And I think this is what's so beautiful about working with design pieces, with design exhibition, that it's always on the move. So there's no end to it. Ellen?
I think Tal has an image here.
Nope, it's yours.
I do know why it's here, because it's an exhibition I've done in the New Institute in Rotterdam, and it was a research exhibition, so it's not really about working with designers so much. I think it was supposed to be under Cube, but I will talk about it anyway. I just
skip it if it's not in a place.
Doesn't matter. I put it here because this exhibition, I had a lot in my mind. They were just building the new website for the New Institute. And I had a lot of thoughts in my mind about what remains from an exhibition, because usually it's like 5 images and 150 word text. In this case, both in the new website, there was an option to put a lot of material, research material, on the website and make kind of an archive of an exhibition. And also this exhibition, which I think I have a diagram, maybe not now, maybe later. No. So later, was due to the space, was planned as a docubition. So there was a kind of a documentary on the move. And we also created a documentary for the exhibition, which remained as a product after the exhibition, and the thing that kind of tells the story. So I think sometimes this idea of that you make an exhibition, it's so ephemeral, it disappears. If you haven't visited, it doesn't have anything. It's like you don't know anything about exhibitions that happened and you weren't there. Nothing. So I think it's nice to think about what remains and how we communicate also that craft, and not just the craft of the object or the video or whatever.
Agree, totally agree. Okay, design. I'm not gonna stop here, even though this is very challenging for us. And I'm gonna ask Samir Araz from ICOM. Maybe we need to have another session just to talk about what we think design is. But this is one of the earliest objects of design that we have at the Israel Museum. And I think when I look at those objects and I think about this moment of a person, a lady, grabbing a stone from the ground and making some marks, trying to create an image, trying to create an idea or an image of an idea of herself or humanity. This for me is the early beginnings of design. So for me, when they say design is a young profession, it only belongs to the 150 years of our time, I feel that design has started long before that. Cube, Tal, I think I've made a mess.
No, I did it. I made a mess. Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna jump over to Cube of Ellen.
Well, people talk about the white cube as this standard of, galleries creating this pure white box to see objects in. And I actually have cube envy because my museum has no white boxes. It's so complex and has all this woodwork and gold leather wallpaper and floors that you can't, drill into. It's just like this precious building. So this is an exhibition I did with Ellen Lupton in 1997, where I wanted to create a cube. And so we inserted into the room a cube made out of birch plywood. And wherever we needed a showcase, it was as if it had folded out of the wall or cut a hole in the floor and brought a piece of this plywood up to show objects on. So, the purpose of the cube is to create an abstract space for objects. And that's what its purpose is. And sometimes we have to make our own cube.
Not white, though.
Not
No,
white.
this one isn't white, but it could, sometimes white is the right color.
No.
I find it white.
And I think Tal has
like this. I somehow always work with very difficult spaces. Like this is the diagram I made for the exhibition that I just showed an image of, which is in the New Institute, which is kind of a postmodern building, very weird for design. And this gallery is kind of like a square corridor around an open space, and it's super linear. It's like 3 something meter wide for 3 of its sides, and then one is like a 200-meter gallery. So it's super linear, and then this linearity kind of forces itself on you, and that's how it becomes. In this case, it has become a documentary because you have this sense of something leading to something, and it was suddenly sectioned into scenes and stuff like that. So there's also kind of, as I said, designers like specific briefs, I think, and I'm a designer, so we like the limitations, not the endless options.
I think this is why we don't like so much this white cube, because we really like these challenges of reimagining those our exhibitions in interesting new spaces. So I think this brings me to this. So this little gap in between things and a width of heart. So I love this moment of reimagining this gap between objects. And I think this gap between objects is the space that we can think of new ideas. This is where we breathe as visitors. This is where we breathe as curators. We put those objects close to each other, and then something happens in this void. And this void is, I think this is our invitation to ask good questions, to invent something new. And I was very pleased to have 2 exhibitions that allowed me to do that. One was by Yoji Yamamoto, that allowed us to present his outfits and invite people to walk in between the outfits. And it was great, even though some of the people wanted to take off the outfits and try them themselves, which was a challenge, of course, for the guards and the ushers in the museum. And the other one was the exhibition that we did, the last exhibition I curated in the museum for Nendo, that was called The Space in Between. And we were discussing between ourselves this space in between objects and where people fit in and where objects need to talk to each other. So sometimes this space that we leave, it's not a fear of empty space. It's an invitation for an empty space. Yes, sorry, yes.
But when I raised my window shade that
I'll try to talk over it.
I found
Maybe
the
you can
prairies
just put
stretching out.
Just let it play. It's
I
so
was as
beautiful.
surprised, as stunned, as though I had never heard of them before. And the idea came to me like an original thought. How perfectly enormous they are, and how like the sea. In the foreground, there was nothing. In the middle distance, nothing. In the distance, nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Nothing met the eye in all that treeless waste of brown and gray which lay between the railroad line and the horizon, on which was discernible the faint outlines of several ships. Ships which were, in reality, a house, a windmill, and a barn.
Move to the emptiness, openness, monotonous cotton rows of plantation landscapes. Scale sets at the boundary limitations of the fields, where confinement, whipping, and punishment by overseers, invisible and physical markings of territory. The immensity beyond, defined by celestial guidance to freedom via the Underground Railroad, foundationally setting faith and courage for personal will.
Let us remember that the original peoples of Amazonia, after a period that oscillated between 5 and 10 years, abandoned their settlements. They considered them only as provisional stations in a continuous path without a fixed destination.
Wow.
That could be a beautiful place to end. It's so profound, so cosmic.
This is a segment of a 19-minute video done for Friedman Benda Gallery in collaboration with Manifest Institute, which deals with the Americas. And I put it here to discuss my new kind of dream projects of the last 2 years, which is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of probably the shift from curated by to created by or something like that, but it's a really non-hierarchical structure of making things. This was live. This was a live show broadcasted online, and it combined texts from the magazine Manifest, objects virtual by the Misha Khan, which is a designer working with Friedman Benda, Renana Raz, which is an Israeli choreographer, Asapot, which is an Israeli musician, and virtual landscapes done by Sean Maximo, that is in Canada. And you have this kind of managerial and kind of overarching position when you create something like this, but you're also the technical guy or the editor, and everybody has weighs their input into the project. So it's really hard to say this was curated, although it is a group of people, each with a specific job, doing something together. But I had the good fortune of doing a couple of those in the last year and a half, and when it's with great people, it's the best experience ever. And it also breeds in something new, because it's not you that's trying to, negotiate your vision and taking compromises, changing your mind, but it's everybody joining in. And when the chemistry is good, it really, when you combine text and design and camera and blah, 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 it creates really new territories to work in. And it's I fell in love. So back to love. Yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 last slides, one for each one. No, this one. So being a design curator is forever. And I think it's a beautiful craftsmanship as I look at it. It allows me to meet people, to meet ideas, and to weave all that into a wonderful textile of thoughts, ideas, forms, structures, and of course work with designers. So it's usually a very interesting group work, and sometimes I feel that my role is to stand aside or keep everyone together, or just be the one who serves tea and cake as long as it gets the exhibition done. So being a design curator is forever, even if you are not working in a museum or a design week. I think it's something that will stay with you forever. So always, for Ellen?
For me, it's publishing. That as curators, what we do in the gallery is so temporary. It's just there and it's gone. But when you also publish a book, which requires graphic design and more collaboration and editors and all kinds of stuff, then you have something that really does last forever, that is always. And at Cooper Hewitt, we've been publishing books that aren't part of an exhibition, that we see creating knowledge about design as our mission. And sometimes that's a book, sometimes it's an exhibition, and often it's both. So thanks.
And Tal, always?
One of the things that happened in Jerusalem Design Week is that you do the same thing over and over again, and it really is a transforming experience as a curator, I think, because you don't just drop the mic. You have to return and ask the same questions about the same building, and every time come to a different conclusion. And so I'm probably not going to do it always, but for 5 years already, or entering the 6th, this is this repetitive notion of really diving into things under the same context is really a way to make your work, I think, more profound in all its aspects. So it's not about content only. It's like content, audience, budget, production, whatever. It makes you a professional.
Perfect. So our last slide is exactly this for you. So work in progress, please come in. And this is us. I want to thank you both, my partners. I want to thank Tal Ares, the curator and designer of Design Week. I want to thank you, my partner, Ellen Lupton, for this wonderful series. It was incredible. I enjoyed every minute of it. I hope everyone here has enjoyed it. I haven't seen if there are any questions in the chat. No, beautiful. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for being with us. And thank you for the time I could spend with you as a chair for the Design Forum for the last 2.5 years. I'm ending my term. I hope for the next chair to be amazing lady that would take over. And don't forget me, invite me to the lectures and series the next time. Thank you so much, all of you. See you in the best new exhibition that you curate. Ciao.
Thank you, Galit. It was really fun, and Tom and Tal.
Thank you, Ellen. It's been a pleasure.
Really great.